everybody should have some index cards. And so as the conversation evolves, you can write down some questions that you may have, and there will be people floating around that will be able to pick up your questions and then we will answer them. Now, we may not be able to answer all of them, but we do have, as you see on the back, there is a link to the website, and we will answer those questions, or we'll try our best to answer those questions and post them to the link. Also on that link will be a video of this conversation, so you can go there or pass it on to someone else. And the other thing is there's resources. So there's some things on the back of there that you can take home. Talks about check up, speak up, read up, step up, and follow up. And these are things that you can go home and have conversations at the table with your families, with neighbors, or students about this conversation. Is that okay? All right. Well, I'd like to introduce you to our panelists. First, we have Reverend Floyd Tompkins. Oh, we're scared. We have Reverend Dr. Lori Cabina, and we have the president from Marin Catholic, Tim Navoni, and from American Baptist Seminary of the West, we have the Reverend Dr. Valerie Miles Tribble, and we have the Reverend Dr. from our own SFTS, Norton, Yolanda Norton. And so I want to say thank you for taking out the time to be a part of this. They have all been handpicked, and there's a reason why they've been handpicked. There's only two on this panel that is actually from the Bay Area, and that's me and Tim. Matter of fact, we were born at the same hospital. But the rest that's on the panel comes from different places, and those different places, I think, will evolve this conversation and their experiences, their education, and I think it'll be a great conversation. So welcome, and let's get started. So the way we got into this, having this dialogue, or this conversation, it was in June that I was driving one day, and I was taking my son to school. And on the way home, I encountered a person that was driving, and they were trying to push me off the road. They was trying to get in front of me. And as we were driving, they were pushing further, and I'm moving away. And suddenly I just let them go. Well, they drove about 20 feet, and slammed on their brakes. I skid into them. Now, there wasn't any damage to the car, but when they got out, it looked like they had an object in their hand. And so I backed up, and I took off. And I went to San Anselmo, called the police, waited an hour for the highway patrol to show up. The highway patrol showed up. They said they had someone that they wanted to talk to on the phone. And this was supposed to be a witness that they never met. Well, based on the conversation with the witness, they arrested me. I spent 2 days in jail. I've never been arrested. I don't have anything as far as I'm a D-Min student here. I'm a single father. I help people, young men in San Quentin, so they don't continue to go back to prison. I help young men so they don't go to prison, and I find myself locked up. With that said, my son attends school here. And so what I wanted to do before we started this conversation is to talk about some of his issues. And so we have a video of him. Now what I want to do is paint a picture so you can see, yes, this is a beautiful place where we live. Yes, there's a lot of money and it's great places, but we do have some issues with racism here. And unless you dealt with it, you wouldn't know that it occurs. And so when I say that, I say, some of us are privileged And not necessarily privilege on the economic status of how much money you make or where you live or the kind of car you drive, but just privilege because of the color of your skin. And when I say that, that means that these issues don't happen to you, so you don't know that they occur. So if something happens to a person of color, you may say, I don't know that, I can't see how that would happen, but you wouldn't see that happen because you have not experienced that. So if you could, John, could you run the video?
What was the first racial issue that I dealt with at White Hill Middle School? The first one was in 6th grade, and I was scouting for a jazz band. I was just looking over the drummer and the pianist, and I was coming in, found something on the something round on the ground. I called it a ball, and some cocky 8th graders came up to me, and he said, nah, and said the N-word to me, said, nah, it's just a nut, something like that. I went to the vice principal, and I told her about the incident. She called us both in, and once the vice principal asked the kid if he called me the N-word, he said he did not remember it, and that if he did, that he's sorry. Nothing ever happened. He didn't get suspended, getting in trouble. The next issue was the art teacher was explaining where the supplies were, like pencils, paper, and then she said, okay, so the cardboard, if you guys are ever doing projects, are in some certain drawer. And a kid named Danny thought it was funny to say to the whole class that there would be African American or black people in that drawer, since I guess we have the same color skin. I actually told Carrie instead of the vice principal. Thought they were going to handle it, but they never handled it. The next incident was in PE. I was in 6th grade, and we were playing tennis. That was our sport at the time. And my team scored. It was me, my friend Dimitri, and Danny, the same person who said the cardboard joke about the black people, said, okay, congratulations to Dimitri and his African-American friend because we scored. But the thing about it was that Danny actually knew my name, so I guess he thought it was also going to be funny for him to call me African American instead of my real name. That time, I actually told the principal, and a few weeks later, like a long time later, he got suspended and expelled actually, and never came back. So I had an issue. This actually didn't happen between me and another person, but I had an online issue. There was a profile pocket, and it would tell us like our information, like background information, like our address, our name, emergency, which would be my mom and my dad, and the race. Everybody had Caucasian because it's a majority of a white school, and I was also listed as Caucasian. So I came home, asked my dad why was I listed as Caucasian. He said I don't know, and I had to ask my counselor for why I was listed as that. So I went to my counselor, and she got a good laugh out of it. I questioned her. I said, why do you think it's funny? She said that she didn't think it was funny, that just like it's out of the blue or something like that, just a random. They knew that I was not Caucasian. They knew I wasn't white, Asian. They knew that my race was African American, and to have that I was listed as Caucasian made me feel that they were kind of lazy and that they didn't take time to like accurately list my race as everybody else. A few weeks later, I got it changed to my actual race, and yeah, that was the end of that.
So my thing here is, it's 2018, not 1965. And I told the principal, I said, the first time it happened, I said, this should ought to be dealt with. And he said, yeah, I apologize that it happened. It didn't happen again. And then the third time, I said, look, if this continues to happen, now this is the third time, I'm gonna have to go to the media and report this, because I don't think my son should have to go to school under these conditions. And so it's raised the question where we can say we don't do bullying, we don't do drugs and alcohol. So we educate them on drugs and alcohol, teenage pregnancy, We talk about, the LGBT, all of these things, but we never talk about the issue on racism. And when I asked about this to the faculty members, they said, we have to get training for this because we don't know how to deal with this issue. So this is the reason we're having a panel discussion, is so that we can, bring awareness to this issue and educate the community on how we deal with this issue. Is that okay? And so I'm the student of African Diaspora on this campus. I'm the president. And Dr. Lori, she is the Chief Diversity Officer. And so she's also the person that works with us on, most of the African American students here at SFTS. So there are a few questions that I want to direct towards each one of our panelists because they all have particular things that they can deal with that are different. And that's why I said that they're handpicked. And so the first question that I really want to direct it is to Floyd. And the question is, has there been a shift in the power dynamic of racism, protesting of racism? And what specific ways has it changed? And how do you think they need to change? And when Floyd is done, then the other panelists can feel free to join in and chime in at any time.
First of all, thank you for letting me be here tonight and to be a part of this distinguished panel. And I'm just grateful to be in the number. I think we have two roles here, right? To talk honestly and openly, and also to bear witness about our experiences. One of the dangers is that we see things as over there, and we don't know, and we don't think they ever happened here. So I'm going to tell you a little story and then answer that question. A few weeks ago, I was traveling, 2 weeks ago, I was traveling up to Mendocino to preach. I stopped at a coffee shop. And I walked through the door, and the first response when they saw me was, "This place is only for customers." I looked at them and said, "I am one," right? And I walked, because I went to the bathroom, and then I came to have a coffee. There were two other white couples and a white woman behind the counter there. And so I decided I'm going to have a coffee here, no matter what. And when the coffee came, I said, that was a unique way to say welcome here. And she said, well, I'm sorry, I want to give you $1 off because I don't want you to be uncomfortable. I don't want you to leave this place without a smile on your face. I told her there's nothing you can do to change my smile on my face. Because y'all know me. Some of you do. And secondly, I'm going to give you that $1 as a tip because I want you to understand you can't buy off your discomfort of your own integrity. The reason I tell you this story is for two reasons. One, you know about the Starbucks story. You say, oh, that's a terrible thing. That happened as I was going up to Mendocino. And it happened just 2 weeks ago. So, and what I want you to know about that, I was preaching in an all-white congregation. So when I got to Mendocino, they said, oh, you can go have dinner down at the restaurant. And the one thing I decided that I was not going to do was have dinner down at the restaurant because of two things. One is I wanted to protect my soul, right? Because if I had another incident, I could not preach, nor could I be open in a way that I needed to project the love of Christ. Because no matter what you do, this stuff can be very disruptive. Second thing is, I realized my wife was out of town, and had that person in that coffee shop called the cop, I could end up being arrested for doing nothing. And there would be no one to call, and I would be the only black person. So it changed the way I moved in that place. And it also changed the way I, as a human being, walked around. And it was a wonderful time, great congregation, I enjoyed that. But I want you to know that there are folks walking around that kind of change. I wasn't going to say anything until a friend of mine put this on the Starbucks thing because he goes to that Starbucks every day. And on the web, there were so many people who said, I can't believe it, there must be another story. Maybe the black person did this, blah, blah, blah. So I want you to know, no, you can do nothing. And just be black. And walk through a door and end up in jail. And never do anything. And it is not then someone the other. Some of you have preached at your church, some of you are walked in there. That can happen, not because of anything you do, but who you are. So in terms of the power dynamics, I don't think they've changed so much. What has changed is that young people have decided, and they're right, if we wait to take, and I need to just context. So I came from here to here after working 14 years with young people in rural South Georgia, the poorest countries in poorest counties in South Georgia. And what we did was a leadership project. And every one of those kids, and what we saw is those kids created nonprofit organizations. Those kids changed the world. I already knew that Parkland was coming. I already knew that this is a generation that decided if we wait to get this world after you've screwed it up, it would be too late. I also realized that these folks also, because of the media reality, had power more quickly and earlier. And that they were going to move that. And I watched how those kids did. So instead of now leading the conversations, I think we are now the facilitators of it. I think in some sense they will move forward. Having said that, let's be very clear. This is also not new. SNCC was founded by college students. They were not founded by the old people. Martin Luther King died before he was 40 years old. Actually, before he was 30 years old. So understand something, that the young always lead us. It's just that when you get older, you think, you forget that. You forget that it is the passion of the moment that gives you the courage to confront and say the world ought not be this way. I don't need to accept it. And I think that is changing because now with the power of media, they now have a chance to speak more clearly. And what I would say is that we don't need to discount their reality because when I experienced that, I have been a black man almost all of my life. So I knew most of my life. I was a black boy for a while. So I had learned that there are things you do. That you make a decision about whether I need to stand up now or, let this fool be this thing, right? But if I'm young, I don't have that. I am just experiencing that. And my passion could get me in trouble early. That's the danger. That is why we have these movements. That is why the prisons are filled, because kids acting like kids are being treated like men who are thugs. And that is the other power shift, that we've criminalized kids being offended by racism. That's really all we're doing. And now we've done more than criminalize them. Stop now, because that's a future thing. Now we've done more than criminalize them. Now we're killing them. We're killing the 14-year-old. We're shooting at a 14-year-old boy who walked out to the door and does something stupid. It's like, what you doing going up to somebody's door knocking, asking for directions? Don't you know better? No, you don't. You're 14. You don't know better. You just do that, right? Or try for Ron Martin. I'm just going to the store and this man is facing me and now I get killed. So we are now not just criminalizing it. We're now killing kids who are black for being black. And that can happen at any moment, and that can happen here, and it changes how parents deal with kids, and it changes also how we deal with kids. So that's the power dynamics that I think have changed.
Thank you. One of the things is, I did not say was the reason why they arrested me. And they arrested me for assault with a deadly weapon, using my vehicle for personal injury. And they said they weren't arresting me for hit and run. They was arresting me for assault with a deadly weapon. Well, they let me go and drop the charges. And then when I went to court, they said, well, now you don't have a court date. You don't have your own record. But just if we find something, we will contact you and let you know that you have to come back to court. Well, about 6 weeks later, they responded back, the district attorney, with assault with a deadly weapon, hit and run, and reckless driving. And the reason I'm bringing this back up is because something that Floyd had said, and it was that a lot of times, now me, when I went to go see an attorney, he wanted $10,000 to represent me. I don't have $10,000. So what happens is a lot of times when you don't have $10,000, you have to come up with a plea bargain and say you're guilty when you're not, so you don't go to jail. But now you're a felon. Thank God that the gentleman that was representing me, after he said $10,000, I went ballistic. I said, well, let me just ask something to you. You know, I said, I teach anger management and domestic violence. I teach people, you know, in urban communities how to conduct their anger. I said, I don't get paid to do that. I do that because I do it from my heart. I said, I go in San Quentin, I preach to the inmates, I teach them these things because I want to help them. And so he said that he was a judge in San Francisco, and I asked him, well, since you're a judge, let me work with the young youth that you know, work with and take my case. And he took it pro bono. And he didn't charge me anything, and he took care of it. But they still have, there's still a process that's hanging over my head. And the process is, we're not saying that you're guilty. We just want you to agree to the terms and conditions. So, with what Floyd was saying is true, and I'm sure, Reverend Yolanda, I know you probably remember the situation that happened in Virginia with Allen Iverson. And that was a situation, I was living in Virginia, Allen Iverson was in high school, and there was a situation where a person called him the N-word, he retaliated, they fought, he went to jail. He spent his whole senior year in jail. Now, because he had a gift, and he had all of these celebrities coming to help him, that was the only reason he got out. But nevertheless, he spent his whole senior year in jail. And then they said, not guilty. So my next question is to Dr. Valerie Triple. And that is, because a lot of times we wonder, okay, where does the church play a part in this? You know, and this is a seminary. And so, how can the church be a proper ally and resistance against racism? That's my first question.
First of all, thank you for the question. First of all, I think it is, I'm going to follow up a little bit on Floyd's comments as well as yours. I think it's important for this evening to define what we mean by racism. Because when we're in audiences, and particularly mixed audiences, I'm sure that there are many of you who are absolutely good people and you're thinking to yourselves, I'm not a racist. I've never said the N-word. I've never treated anyone bad. But racism isn't just overt hatred. Racism also takes the form of inertia, unwillingness to speak up, like the people in the Starbucks coffee shop that saw this happening, saw the men come in, knew they hadn't done anything, but didn't speak up. Racism also takes the form of indifference. Since it's not happening in my neighborhood or to my family, I wish them the best in the issue. Oh, that's too bad. But it's still indifference. And a lot of us that consider ourselves liberals suffer from indifference. And indifferent liberalism is as dangerous as overt supremacist hatred. The other forms of racism include blindness and what Emily Towns says, a fear induced by an overactive imagination. motivated by the images that we see, and hence you end up seeing a tall black man like Floyd coming in, and all of a sudden it's like E.F. Hutton. Everyone stops and the eyes get big because the assumption is that something's going to go wrong. So I just want to say that racism is more than just overt hatred. It is, we really have to be self-reflective about where we are in our reactions to people and othering people. That said, I think that a tendency of the church, and we may be an interreligious company, so I will say the tendency of religious communities is to find talking about issues that are too negative, to find those things to be counter to the goodness and the love of the gospel tenets or theoethical tenets of behavior. And so everyone wants to talk about love and justice, and everyone wants to have kumbaya moments. And if we just love each other inside these doors, everything outside of those doors will go away. It does not. And so one of the things that I think is important as leaders in faith communities, whether you are clergy or whether you are laity, we're all leaders in some way, is to invite our communities to have the tough dialogue. First of all, to raise awareness on what is going on outside of our doors, to address the dilemma, what can we do about it? What should we do about it? What does our teaching say we should do about it? And then to really assess what capacity do we have to address the issues. One of the things that we have seen is that we do have, first of all, being silent or being passive. We feel that everything going on outside of our doors is so political, but being silent and being passive is a political statement. You've taken a political stance by doing nothing, saying nothing. So I think that by doing nothing, saying nothing. So I think that it's important that first of all we have that dialogue. If we are truly to be one family of God, what does that mean? If we believe that we are prophetically called to speak truth to power, to enact a just living, to understand that everyone has the right to humanity and to be treated humanely, then we have to ask ourselves, where are we complicit? That's the first step. First of all, we have seen, the media has shown, our young people are very disillusioned with the state of affairs civically, and they're also very disillusioned about the lack of action on the part of our faith communities and sometimes on the part of their families and their school leadership. And most movements, global movements around the world, the synergy comes from the young people who feel compelled, as Floyd said, to do something about it. The tendency, though, in our faith communities, and possibly our schools, is to quiet our children. And I know I came up in a generation where children were supposed to be seen and not heard. But I raised a son who does not understand that principle at all. And so I have to answer tough questions. He feels that he has absolute right to debate me on issues. And he does. And I think that one of the things we have to do is to understand generationally that we are dealing with young people because of the media, because of things happening around the world, hitting them instantly. Their worldview is far more sophisticated than the worldview that we have. And some of the things that we feel uncomfortable talking about, they want to talk about. It is important because even our young people, when I walked up, there were young kids out there playing. They're afraid to go to school. They're afraid of the police. They don't have many places where they can go to discuss that fear. And so unless we are willing to listen to those tough questions, we miss out on an opportunity to help them be empowered.
Thank you. This next question is directed towards Reverend Dr. Yolanda York. And I want to ask about marginalized communities suffering from racism more overly, called out the merging of their discrimination, including factors like race, gender, class, and more. So how can homogeneous communities develop the capacity to be educated on intersectional discrimination and not further oppress and negate the full lived realities of these communities?
So, before I move into the kind of particular areas of your question, I want to talk about some issues of intersectionality. Particularly, I think about Kimberly Crenshaw and her work on intersectionality, which becomes incredibly important for Black women. Crenshaw, when she, in her research, she's a lawyer and a professor of law, and when she talks about her research, she did studies on government policy, and what she found was that when you look at racial discrimination, it's most easy to file a racial discrimination charge if you are a Black man. If you look at gender discrimination charges, it's easiest to file charges if you are a white woman. And so she looked particularly at something that happened with Ford Motor Company, where a group of Black women were being discriminated against, and they tried to file suit, and they were unsuccessful because the Ford Motor Company could prove that they weren't discriminating against Blacks because they had Black men in positions of power. And they could prove that they weren't discriminating against women because they had white women in positions of power. So Black women got caught in the crosshairs of this kind of ignorance about intersectionality. The other work that she does, she looked at public policy and realized that there had been an influx of policies to help Black boys succeed, right? And so she started to look for what policies were in place to help Black women. Well, she finally got excited because after months of work, she found one policy, federal policy that had been put in place to help Black women. But when she started to research the policy, she found out that it was for Black women in Africa. So Crenshaw asked the question, what do you do when all the Blacks are men, all the women are white, and all the Black women are African, right? That we've created a culture of ignorance that is wholly unconcerned with people who live at the intersections of marginalization in this country. And so the question is, what's the answer to that? And I could wax on about that for a long time, but I think Kelly Brown Douglas best articulates an answer to this. She did a lecture about racism in the era of Trump. And at the end of the lecture, a woman came, kind of well-intentioned, in tears, white woman, asking, like, what am I supposed to do? How do I deal with issues of racism, sexism, intersectionality? How do I address these as a person? She said, well, be a human. And if that's not native to you, treat humanity like a foreign language. Practice a little every day until you figure it out, right? So the response is, pay attention to people. The things that you want for yourself, people want for themselves, right? As an African American, as a woman, as an immigrant, whether you are a part of the LGBTQ community or not. And then, by the way, the lumping together of LGBTQ and not understanding how that's dangerous for particular pockets of that community. People have needs to be loved, to be affirmed as human beings, to be able to walk down the street without people being afraid because of their own insecurities and inhumanities. It's actually not a complicated formula to deal with it, and understand that it's your responsibility, right? It's not my responsibility as a black woman to teach white people about what it means to be a black woman. You gotta do the work. It's not people who are gay or lesbian or trans, their responsibility to teach me about what their realities are. It's my responsibility to do the work, to have the compassion, to be a part of communities that expose me to things. And if I'm not willing to be uncomfortable, if I need to feel good about myself in order to acknowledge somebody else's humanity, I've already failed. The work of acknowledging somebody else's reality is uncomfortable and it's hard. And so I think we just have to get over ourselves and learn how to be in a place of dissonance and discomfort.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to change the order because I'm kind of led to want to target you this time. Tim. Tim, I want you to share with me, just before you get started, is the conversation that we had one time. You told me, and I don't know it all, but I want you to kind of let me know again how you were talking to your dad and something had happened, and you got to the point where you told him, he says, how do we change this? You know, how do we change the way this is? And I think it had to do with racism. And you said your father told you something like you have to be a part of, you know, you got two choices to be a part of the solution or the problem.
I'll correct you on one thing. It was not my father. Unfortunately, it was not my father. It was I grew up, I'm born in Oakland, and families from the East Bay, but came to Marin, and then my wife was going to attend medical school. And so I was moving to Memphis, Tennessee at the time. I think this is the conversation, correct me if it's not, but I was moving to Memphis, Tennessee, and a very different place than Oakland, and a very different place than Marin in the Bay Area. And I was actually working, my job had me in a service bureau, and there was a gentleman, I said, hey, this is about the last time I'm going to be in here. I'm moving to Memphis. And he was like, you know, kind of shuddered for a second. He said, oh, I'm from Memphis. And he said, let me tell you, the reason I'm here is because I had to kind of get away from Memphis. And he said, when you go to Memphis, and I was going to Memphis to work for Martin Luther King's organization, so I checked every box of like, hey, I'm not racist, look what I'm doing. I'm working for King's organization, I'm fine. You know, well, but, and he said, you have to be a part of the solution or you're going to be a part of the problem. And that sat with me in a huge way. And my wife was in medical school, and I was going through a process of joining a church at the time. And I chose to go to Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church, which is a church of 8,000, an African American congregation, and my wife and I were the only two white members in there. And so I appreciate when you say putting yourself in a difficult situation, because it was very difficult at first from everything, from people I'm working with at King's organization who were white people who were saying like, why are you going there? Why are you going there? And you know, are you disciples of Christ? Or you know, they didn't understand what my situation was, and then also it was even received by the African American population at the church. It was like, when's this project going to end? Like, are you coming here to write a paper, or you know, what are you doing here? And came on to be well loved by that congregation, and in fact, our art department head at Marin Catholic, African American gentleman, Lauren Carpenter. We met in a premarital counseling class there, 11 couples there. And so what I would say to that, I really appreciate what you said in terms of identifying or just kind of giving a definition of racism. At Marin Catholic, there's, racism's alive and well. There's no hiding that we deal with stuff for all the time, and they fall into different areas. Sometimes it's ignorance, sometimes it's curiosity, most times it's fear, and then hopefully very few, it could just be just straight hate, and you don't like that. So we're in the business of education, but I think what I found is education is awesome, but generally, as what you're talking about is, Reverend Norton, is exposure and putting yourself out there in what are going to be uncomfortable situations. I could have gone one day and said, hey, wait, I was mistreated by this congregation as well, and that I'm going to just go somewhere else. But decided to stick with that, and it gave me my very best friend on the earth. So.
I wanted to ask, because you just led me to the next question. And the next question is, why is it dangerous for affluent, white, progressive communities to deny the existence of racism within its boundaries?
I'm long-winded, but I can say, because it's happening. Thank you. It's happening, and I think again, to Dr. Reverend Triple, what you're talking about, that it has so many faces of it that if you just, it's very easy for anybody to say, I'm not racist, and for those same things, because they're looking for, they're couching it just as the overt. And blindness is huge, and if you want to be have the easiest path on the planet Earth, you can be most blind, right? I'm a white man in the United States, in Marin County. The world is made for me, and it's going to be it. But what it does is it puts you in the most blind space. So it makes it so you trip up more. You make more mistakes. You think that more things are not happening than are happening, and every situation is complex. We've had an African American student felt very uncomfortable playing a sport and was on a team, and one of the kids on his team who thought he was very good friends and just does it. He said, I was so curious. He just wanted to touch his hair. He hadn't seen. He's like, this is new, and it's like, no, this is not a toy. This is not something you get to explore, and that, it's just those. It's happening, and that's why. If you deny it's happening, then you're in real trouble.
And I have one last question for you. Hold on to the mic, sir. I actually, he is a good friend, and so I feel like I can mess with him. He's still my friend, right, Tim?
We'll see.
That's funny. How can white peers hold their communities accountable for the denial of racism and blindness to privilege? And how can white peers confront their racism?
We'll still be friends. That's not too bad. I can handle it. I think doing things like doing this, it's something I'll share with our board of regents tomorrow night, which will elicit questions and different things. And again, you got to challenge other people to see the blind spots. It's very easy to be busy. I'm busy. I promise I'm busy. I've got some colleagues here they can vouch for it. And you can run the race without acknowledging. We are at Marin Catholic. One of the things that's important to me is access, and in Marin County, most families have access to Marin Catholic High School, and by either economic status, but the one community that I was most drawn to, because I grew up in Oakland, and so I spent a lot of time, was most welcome when I came to Marin by the African American community, and spent a lot of time in Marin City. But Marin City didn't have access to Marin Catholic in ways that the canal did. And the reason that it was the case is because the Hispanic community has just an innate fabric with the Catholic culture. So there are foundations that are set up to help Latino community members come to our school, and they'll pay for that. But Marin City didn't have access. So that's something we wanted to do. And so as we began to expand that, and your son is a part of which is the largest African American class we've ever had, as our freshman class. It creates more issues on school for them, I think, because all of a sudden, how do I say this? I'm frustrated with schools that, what I would say, checkbox diversity. They want to checkbox diversity. They want to say, well, we have an African American teacher, and they'll go pay for that and have that happen. So they check it off, and then they think they're good. Or we have African American students, and then now we're good. But what we found is we have a gentleman, a young alum who's going to join our Board of Regents, a young African American who's coming in. He's actually coming in next Wednesday. He's coming in monthly to meet with our African American students and just have lunch with them. And kicks me out of the room. I'm not invited. And he had a very wonderful trajectory through Marin Catholic and successful. And he wanted to give back. And I said, would you just have a conversation with these African American boys and the girls, and now invited, we had them there, and that proved, it almost felt when I saw them leave the room that day that they just took 25 pounds off their back. And I'm in conversation with those kids all the time, but he provided something that I couldn't. Well, first of all, he walked the experience through Marin Catholic. I don't know what happens in those conversations, but I sure don't think they're just saying how great it is. That they're dealing with stuff each day. And so, as far as other peers, John O is going to join our board, not because of the color of his skin. He's joining the board because he has a gift to bring to our school. It's something that we feel like needs to be addressed.
A lot of times, we as people of color, especially, I can only speak for myself, growing up in East Oakland, there had been a lot of trauma in my neighborhood communities in which I grew up. And some of the issues were a lot of issues were dealing with the police, because a lot of young men were being killed, a lot of young men were being murdered, and guns were being planted, And so that affected me, but it also affects my son. And the reason it affects my son is because now I have to teach him how to come home. So when he leaves the house,
He comes home with me, just so you know.
Yeah.
I'm driving, he's okay.
Sometimes he's walking. And he said, President Maloney was in that meeting. And, so when he's not riding home with you, or if he's not at home when he's supposed to be at home, and I know, and I'm looking for him, I'm frustrated, I'm nervous, because I'm thinking, is he going to come? Because there may be
And this is the trauma that I had to deal with, that I portrayed on him, because I'm concerned about him coming home. And so, leading to that question is, Lori thought I forgot about her.
I was praying about it. So apparently it's not working.
Lori is over pastoral care and she deals with trauma. And so the question that I have for you is, how does generational trauma stress appear in Black communities? That's the first question.
Let me begin a discussion on trauma and race to talk a little bit about race. Last week, I attended a lecture and had a conversation with Duana Wiley, who is a professor in anthropology at Stanford. And she was talking about, and we talked about, basically science in a kind of an anti-science political context, and race in an anti-racism political context. That is, some of the challenges that science are being seen in trying to make race some kind of immutable scientific fact, when in fact race is not biological. Race is a social construct. Because it's a social construct and not biological doesn't mean that it does not have real effects. Racism has real effects on human bodies. And the effects on the human body are intentional because race was created to hurt people and to advantage other people. That's the only reason it exists. To hurt certain people and to advantage other people. And so race gives permission to be violent against certain bodies. It gives permission to hit certain bodies. It gives permission to shoot certain bodies. It gives permission to make you feel bad about yourself. And one of the purposes of making you feel bad, of causing you to have a bad experience, of causing a parent to have to worry about their child getting home from school when they're walking. My niece lived with me her last 2 years of high school, and she walked home from, what's the high school? Drake. And I worried about her every day walking home from school. And she did have incidents walking home from school. Once somebody drove by her and pointed her like they were shooting her, which scared her. It was a child, a younger person who did this action to her, in sitting in the back seat of a car. And so when she got home, we called the police, we filed a report. But these things these kind of things are meant to terrorize people. Race gives permission to terrorize people. And one of the things is that this is kind of identity politics, so that racialized bodies inherit a biological consequence. And the biggest consequence is death. So that race becomes a lived experience. And so becomes trauma affects us in a way that it becomes a part of our psyche. It becomes part of the work we have to do to heal ourselves. So imagine what would be happening if I didn't have to do the work to heal myself from daily hits of racism against my body. I could be like writing the epic novel. But instead, I'm coping with what it means for my body to receive racial violence against it. Whether it's just the person who doesn't who doesn't give me service at Macy's, or a fear that I have when I'm out somewhere. So that this takes up a lot of room. And And also, when you don't have to deal with that, with the violence of race, that is, if you're advantaged by race, you have a lot more room to, you know, do other things. So, and also just a little bit about the intersectionality. When you can be violent against certain bodies, then you can be violent against certain environments. You can be violent against certain gender. You can be violent against certain sexual orientation. You can pick and choose where the politics of identity are going to damage other people. So racism is really, it's really important for racism to exist, for sexism to exist, for heterosexism to exist, for us to have permission to cause animals to become extinct, pollute the air and the water. These climate crises, they're all related in terms of the politics of it, creating politics, constructing a society where certain people and certain things are damaged on purpose to cause them pain. So the reason that racism exists is to cause people pain, is to hurt people, and in the extreme to kill people. And I say in the extreme, that's not that extreme because black people get killed all the time with no consequence against the people who do the murder. And it's enforced by the state. These are state-sanctioned murders, which slavery was a state-sanctioned institution. So sort of to understand how trauma gets passed down, it's to understand that this violence is being done purposefully. So the first time I was called the N-word was when I was 5. And when I was 5, I didn't have glasses. I mean, I couldn't see. I couldn't see at all. And so one of the things in my personal history is my mom always wanted to swim. So of course I'm from Indiana. She's from the small town Madison, Indiana. So of course she wasn't allowed to swim in the public pools. So when she went to college, she made it her business to learn to swim. And she learned to swim. And that meant that she had nappy hair in a time when you had to have straighten hair if you were a black woman. So that tells you how much she wanted. You probably don't know what this is. If I think here and it's raining, then my whole hair situation changes. So she taught us to swim. So we were a black family swimming where no other black people were swimming. We swam competitively. I swam all the way through college. And so did my siblings. So I was at a swim meet in Bloomington, Indiana, between events playing in the baby pool. And I'm like 5 or 6. My older sisters are a little older, so they're actually, I'm playing, you know. And then someone calls me the N-word, and I can't even see who it is. And I'm looking around because because I couldn't see, I thought people were orange. Everybody kind of looked orange to me. So I knew I was black because of the way people treated me, but I actually thought everybody was orange. So I couldn't really distinguish how people look. I could just distinguish how people treated me. And so I remember running to my mom and saying, somebody called me a name. And she's like, what name did they call you? Well, I can't say the word. She's like, just forget it. But that is how important it is that another child in the baby pool at a swim meet knows to call me the N-word. And in all honesty, I probably didn't look too much darker than the people I was in the pool with. But they all knew everybody on the swim swimming circuit in the greater Midwest and into Kentucky, into Ohio, knew that these black people were swimming. Everybody knew we were black. That's why I realized that this isn't about complexion. This is a social construct to make sure that certain people can be hurt, that certain people can be denied, certain people can, it's legitimate to traumatize, and I would say terrorize. And I think if you could see racism as a terrorist social construct, it might sort of open up your heart to really dismantling this kind of social agreement. Because I don't agree that white people are white. I don't agree that because of that you get certain skin privileges. I don't agree with that. But when you don't agree, you basically get punished. You get punished, and sometimes you get killed. So this kind of dialogue, I think one reason it's hard to have it is because it's dangerous dialogue. It's dangerous dialogue, and it has real consequences in real life. So I think that's how, in terms of transgenerational, these things get moved from generation to generation because this terroristic social construct where certain people are privileged and other people are punished.
Let me ask you, how can predominantly white communities identify the signs of racial trauma and provide the space and support they need?
Well, I think, I really don't know what it's like to beat a black person. But I could just imagine that's traumatizing for a white person. I don't know, maybe it's not. But I can't see how continually doing violence in my theological construct world, the way that people become evil is to do evil again and again and again. So you don't become evil just because you do something evil, but if you do it again and again and again, it sort of does something to you where all of a sudden you are acting in a way that would be considered not just sinful, but morally corrupt. I do wonder what the consequences are of shooting unarmed black men for the people who shoot. I do wonder what the consequences are for spewing violent words towards somebody. I think the idea that white people go unscathed and are not traumatized, or at least morally compromised, would be going. I imagine that there is some injury to white people when they do an act of violence. It would seem that most religious traditions would say, oh yeah, don't do those kind of things, because you'll put yourself in moral danger. Some would say your soul will be in danger. So I think the first thing to do is be honest about the trauma that's happening in your own household. And then if you can, gain some empathy, and also right-size your understanding of how wonderful you are because you've been socialized white, which you probably don't even realize. So I would say start in your own home. I'm in pastoral care, and a lot of sort of 30-something, early 40-something black women come to seminary or come into this realm. And I have the kind of work where people tell me about their lives. And when I start to hear about the kind of violence in the home of gated communities that white women are sustaining, or white men have sustained, it's painful. And I think this is going on in your community. community. And yet, there's this permission to be violent against people that you have identified as black or brown or gay or whatever. That is messed up. That's problematic. That's troublesome, and I think we have to. I mean, I'm willing to do it. Not all black people, but we have to help save each other.
If I could ask the question, you brought up some really powerful points. Could I just ask in the audience, I know my leadership class is here, church leadership. If you could just raise your hand. How many others here are in seminary studying theology, pastoral care? Awesome, awesome, awesome. And how many here are pastors working in church? Okay, great. And then teachers? Okay, so we have a huge group here whose life commitment is to work and serve others. And nobody is really working then or serving in a vacuum. And that's important to know. So the things that we're talking about resonate in a school setting, a church setting, community setting, and so I think we can be real in this topic.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
One of the things that
Let me just want to mention that. There was the questions and answers, and I saw a lot of people filling them out. Could you bring them?
I'll collect them. So if you have any questions, you all have index cards. So I'm going to collect them. I'm going to bring them up to Stewart, and he'll go ahead and get some of them answered. But as he said, we might not be able to get all of them answered. So if we can't, we will answer them. They'll just get them on the website.
And I'll collect them on this side if anyone over here.
okay, so you got that. So I just need to refer. Barack Obama came to law school when there was a particular set of professors dealing with race in the law. Derek Bell, and my favorite is Patricia Williams. And she wrote a book called The Alchemy of Racism. If you haven't read the book, you should, because it deals exactly, there's an essay called The Theology of Race, which she's actually kind of dealing with, trying to figure out exactly, not the trauma, but what is it that we have to deal with that is not simply a law issue or a politics issue. Because you can change all the laws you want, you change all the politics you want, but the reality is there's something on the inside that you have to get to. This is why I'm a minister, right? This is why we have, this is, I can say this is the faith confession, because it isn't simply something that you can legislate away. It literally is. This is the power of the Spirit. This is what we do as people of faith. We actually believe that what you believe is how you act out. So if we change what you believe, right, and then you'll act differently. So I just wanted to mention that book because that is a singularly great work that actually broods about the limitations and what the work, as you say, Yolanda, the work that you have to do, that you can't offload to the law or to anything else, is something we have to do. It's called The Alchemy of Race. Right? And the essay is called The Teleology of Race.
And to Lori's point, when we talk about the trauma that Black people experience, a lot of times, particularly recently, we're talking about these kind of Trayvon Martin explicit violent moments. But a lot of the trauma that we experience as Black people doesn't happen in those moments, right? So I'm a Black woman from the South. I haven't actually lived in the South in a really long time. And most days I end up missing good old grade A Southern racism, right? Because I would just assume you put up a flag and tell me that you have a problem with my Blackness. But the trauma that we're experiencing as Black people in Marin, in California, is the kind of trauma that says, like, I say I'm doing the right thing. I say I'm trying, right? I'm liberal, I'm progressive, as if those things are supposed to cover a multitude of sins, right? And so it's this trauma that makes Black people feel crazy when you know things are happening to you that should not be happening to you. When you know people are crossing the street because you're walking down the street in your own neighborhood. When you know that you are occupying a position that white people don't want you to occupy, right? Those are the things that drive Black people crazy, because it's there, but it's hidden behind like, I mean well, or I'm liberal, or I'm progressive. And that's a whole different kind of trauma that we don't tend to talk about, because we're occupied talking about people who can't walk down the street without being physically violated, when we're being psychically and emotionally and spiritually violated every single day.
I think Lori's comments also about trauma are profound, because even as people of color, and this I think is important for those of you who are of European descent, for people of color, we have generations of this trauma, and now that it's more overt, we have intergenerational trauma dealing with our kids. And so sometimes this trauma gets manifested in a reactive sense to not only what we see on social media or what happens in the news or goes on TV, but perhaps a reactive sense to something that happens in our daily walk, as I think as maybe Lori or Yolanda said, how you get treated at Macy's. So we overreact, and it's easy to get this angry Black man, angry Black woman label put upon us, because there's just something from deep down that says, I don't want to have to take this anymore. I don't want my kids to have to take it anymore. And so you may be the nicest person in the world, but it is this, the problem with trauma is that it also invokes this sense of unnecessary boundaries and hostilities between one another that we all have to work on. But I totally agree with what Yolanda says. It also isn't our job to teach you how to be humane. We have to do that with one another. Now, I got a card that says, that has a question. It says, we hear the N-word used among Blacks in music, social media, movies, etc. Why, and is it only offensive when said by whites? Okay, so this to me is a contextual, cultural issue. First of all, I go back again to womanist ethicist Emily Towns. She is the dean at Vanderbilt currently. And she talks about the fact that there is this hegemonic imagination that has become so much a part of our culture that it's in our imagery, it's in who the record industry even wants to back to make records. It is in our lived experience to where the typologies are placed upon people of color. Sometimes, even though in my generation coming up, that the N-word was a pejorative word, because as Lori explained, it was used by the dominant culture to label or to hurt the identity of people of color. As Emily Towns talks about that being the narrative, and one of the ways that we counter that we operate or survive is to develop our own counter narrative. That in actuality, our young people, through their entertainment, through their media, through their calling out in their form of social criticism of some of the injustices that are occurring publicly, they are using the N-word counterculturally to turn what has been meant to be pejorative into a relational, I see you, I understand you, you're my nigga. Okay? And they're doing it in a way that says, we have license to use this to recognize that we are in this same plight and that the society is using it in a totally different way. That's why it means something different if someone who's not in that cultural group then comes up and says, yeah, you my nigga too. And the eyes and the head start turning like, you know. And so young white kids are saying, well, you're my friend, how come it's not okay for me to use it? Because there's a lot of other baggage that comes with that term when it is not being used in a way that is a counter-narrative, okay? And so you have almost a language, just like the slaves had to have a language. Just like if you go to any other culture in this world, going to Costa Rica, to Limon, where the Jamaicans were brought, they have a language that they use so that the Spanish colonizers couldn't understand what they were saying. It's a coding. Well, no.
Just to show the diversity of opinion here. I disagree with you.
Okay.
Because I work with kids, and one of the things, just like I don't want them to say the B word, I don't want them to say the N word. Mm-hmm. Because both are degrading.
I didn't say I wanted to.
No, I didn't want to. So, when I encounter young people doing that, I try and to have a conversation about what they're really saying, and half the time they have no idea what they're really saying. They're just mocking the medium. And when you put it in context, then there's a different reality there. I don't think I shouldn't say when I disagree, I just wanted you to know there was a difference of opinion. I do understand that, because I had to teach her that this institution would still be a winner. If you know her, she was very clear about everything you just said. However, I don't want you to say, why is it that black folk can say this and we can't? First of all, why do you want to? Second of all, you really want that? No. Just back away from the word and let it alone, right? It is not helpful to anyone. I don't want you to say the B word too, right? I don't care, right? I don't care who you are, I don't care what context, I don't care where context, no, right? And it is not true that everyone thinks it's okay for black folks to say that either, all right? In a perfect world, those two words would not have been constructed on the anvil of pain. They are here, not because we want them, but because they are absolutely problematically here. And so the reality is, how does one get away from it? Now, that is not to say that if a kid does that, I go ballistic. But like I said, there's a conversation that has to happen. But please be very clear. I want to say this very, very clearly. It ain't all right for anybody, right, to use especially those two words. And I also throw another one, is I don't want to have the F word too, about LGBTQ, right? No. But they call it, I don't care. Back away from the word, and why do you want to use the word? So that's just my little opinion, right? Thanks.
But I think it's a fine point to bring up is like, why do white people want to use this word? Right? Ta-Nehisi Coates talks about, like, the problem is that oftentimes white people feel entitled to language, right? The impulse that something is held back from you, right? So whether or not people on this panel agree with black people saying, right? The idea is when you've created a word to construct somebody's identity pejoratively, and then that group of people say, you don't get to use it anymore, right? The impulse in you that says, but I want it, is a destructive and problematic impulse that you have to check within yourself. It don't matter what we think about black people saying. The reality of the situation, you can't say it. Yeah.
question says, why do you feel like racism has digressed in the last few years, or is it just surfacing more? I don't know that I'm the best person to answer this, but what I would say to that is, it makes me think of the dress code at Marin Catholic. The dress code was a problem 22 years ago, it was a problem 18 years ago, and it's a problem today. So it's, and I'm guessing that's, I do think, again, in the same, just like I talked about at Marin Catholic, right? We've made a step in a direction to reach out to Marin City and to increase the African American population there and access to Marin Catholic. And there comes, obviously, more things are going to happen. I had a friend of mine that was a bit confusing, but really got to understand that, saying, well, they were hopeful just about Trump being president because it's going to just open it up. And maybe we're here tonight because it's been opened up. And so you have to, as you want to put yourself in uncomfortable spots, you want to put yourself into situations that aren't comfortable. It makes it easier when it's just all out there. And so I think we hear so much now today in the media because there's trouble at the top, and now we can talk about it because it's so overt. And maybe as a Christian and from the faith perspective, I never want to go to the negative. You always want to go towards the hope. And so that's our role, is to play a role in the hope that, okay, it is what it is, but it's been opened up, and let's look for opportunity to do something like this or do something like this bigger.
I hate to have another opinion again. but there was a whole lot of things happening before Trump became president. Let us be very clear. The fetishization that's happening with Trump is dangerous. Because what we think is, if we deal with Trump, we do better. And, and no, folk. Trayvon Martin happened before Trump. Things were happening already, so there's a danger of that. Second thing is, in terms of opening up, I'm grateful, but I would imagine this conversation could have happened anyway. So I really appreciate that corrective, that there's a sense that now we got to do something because we done voted him in. And what I think is the embarrassment that's happening, because it was a democracy. Right? And even though it was Hillary Clinton got more votes, right, it was a whole lot of folk. And I'm not going to go through the demographics, but it's very clear. The one person we know didn't put him in office was black women. About 98%, they were very clear. More than black men, they were like, there were 4 black women. If you know black women that voted for, he was one of the 4. Okay, quite frankly, it's very clear that unanimous. Then there was black men, right? And then the second thing, and I could go through the demographics, the other thing that's happening with Trump and with this thing is what has happened to faith and religion. Let us be very clear that, again, it wasn't the Trump thing. It is that there was something so rotten to the core that got exposed. And so these conversations, please don't make this, we have somebody problem at the top. You don't have a problem at the top. You got a problem all the way through. And you finally noticed it because the fool at the top can't help himself. Everybody else, no, it wasn't that we didn't have a problem at the top, but they were smart enough to shut up and say it and quiet. This dude just Twitters it all the time. But the point is that, so I actually think that's a danger, and we need to watch that, right? Yes. And we need to really own the fact that while this gives an opportunity, I love the fact that, we had a little opportunity here, but let's be very clear. As much as I would love to blame him for everything, he is a creation of us.
Yeah, I
want to just respond to, because I have an opinion about what you said. What I would say, though, to that is, and I'm in a position where head of school. Head of school is important, and I've been here in Marin for a while now, and when it does come, when it gets to the top, it gives license to people to act in ways that were formerly hidden. Or so I'm not ever saying that things weren't happening at Trayvon Martin. All the stuff has happened, but the overt license when it comes from the top for a truck with a Confederate flag the day after Trump gets elected to drive through Drake High School parking lot is something I've never seen. All right, I wasn't there, but it came to us. That is a license from the top that causes, that allows people to inflict more damage almost without care or concern anymore, because there's not somebody who's having respect for someone in charge at the top. So I don't disagree with you that things aren't happening and there was buildup and everything else, but there's something that the license from the top is a concern.
I agree, and I appreciate that. I just want you to know the only crime statistic in racism that has risen with Trump being there is among Jews. Every other time is as bad as it was. So this notion that it got worse for people of color, it was bad. Well, it could be worse. I don't know. But anyway, the only people it's gotten appreciably worse for, profoundly worse for, are Jews. The number of incidences, of racial incidences that Jews have doubled and tripled. Oh, doubled, it's doubled. It might triple again, it might be more. So again, in terms of, I agree with you, but I just wanted to say the reality is the depth of reality in terms of crimes, in terms of real body harm done, it's pretty much the baseline. It's just a lot more PR. But if you're Jewish, you're right, it did get worse. And there's more things happening. And I would say the second group would be Muslims.
So I mean, I think that there's a point here, right? It's a matter of who's seeing it, right? So I think about, I was just showing this to a student today, this clip from Blackish, right? I don't watch it, but there's a very poignant clip that happens the day after the election. And the white people are enraged about the results of the election. And the black man he's like, it's the day after an election, what do I care? And they ask why he's not more upset. He said, because this is like every other day for me, right? I have loved a country that's never loved me back. But he says, but you're not used to things not going your way. As people of color, we're used to things not going our way. The difference now is that other people are seeing, right? There are flags that have been flown in Marin County that should not have been flown for a really long time. The question is whether or not you now have to see it because of the person that has been that we've put into the office, right? Like whether or not you voted for him or not, because I clearly didn't, right? I was not voting for him. I guarantee you it wasn't any of the three up here. But right? Because you have to pay attention to what this country has done, now you have to see that it's not going a good way for a whole lot of us. But our situation hasn't actually changed. It was dangerous to be black in 2015. It's dangerous to be black in 2018. And newsflash, in 2019, it's going to be dangerous to be black, right? But now you've got to pay attention, right? Because of who you put in the office.
We're going to move on because we have some other questions. Do you have something brief?
I just have a request. Since we are here at the San Francisco Theological Seminary, thank you, President McDonald, for hosting us, and since we are, by the show of hands, a lot of people in service and people of faith, I just don't want us to run out of time before we talk about some proactive what can we do as
Thank you.
people?
That's
What
what
can we?
Thank you very much. That's what I'm, we're on the same page. Thank you.
Oh, do you want another question or something else? Okay. Given that race and race exist so that some can be heard, expressly for the benefit of another group, will that group ever willingly give up their power and advantage over the hurt group? Does anyone or group give up power and privilege willingly? This is a good question, and actually it was one that I talked to Duana about. I asked her, why was white privilege so robust? Why does it always adjust to the time and seem to negotiate cooperation to always be successful? And one of the things she said, I thought it was a simple answer, but she said, race has become the main way we identify ourselves. Again, she was talking about identity politics, but we see race. So in other words, when I come into a room, I look around to see how many black people are here. Then I look to see how many brown people are here. Then I look to see how many Asian people are in the room. And then I look to see how many people who I might know or know might be gay. Because I'm thinking, if I need somebody, right here. Like, where am I going to go? We identify race. Instead of saying, oh, I wonder who the people who have pierced ears are. Let me, oh, there's mine. That's who I'm going to do. Or who are the people who wear glasses? This is what I see. We see race, and it is our major category for belonging. And so until we change that vision, and we see race because we've been trained and taught to see race. That's why we see race. Because that is the thing we're supposed to see to begin our categorization of who is good and who is not so good. And so the question about giving up privilege and advantage, that's a good question. I would say it's not up to people with privilege and advantage to decide they're going to give it up. Frantz Fanon would say that you have to seize your freedom. You have to seize your liberation. And now, Frantz Fanon in Algeria, they did it violently, but of course their colonizers were extremely violent. I mean, the colonizers are always way more violent than the people they colonized. But then when the colonized rise up, all of a sudden the colonized are some kind of bad people. When they've been like horribly, say 10,000 French died and 10 million Algerians died. I mean, that's the kind of thing that happens. So, I think it would be a mentally healthy turn of events. It would be a spiritually transformative experience. It would be an enlightened movement. If you see that you have power that you're wielding, that you have only because of your skin privilege. And to stop doing that. Yeah, do that. But if you don't do that, it's not all up to you. Because people who are oppressed will always eventually seek their freedom. They will do it. And we've been fortunate, and I think black people in America have been very strategic to not bring mass death upon ourselves. That is, when we were seeking freedom during slavery, we did it in such a way that enough of us stayed alive. So it was the sort of like the strategic attack. Well, so we've got some skill at staying alive and still resisting. Whether it was burning down the house, or poisoning the owner, or running away, or other devices we had. But I would say, yeah, have the spiritual experience of humility, of generosity, and I think you'll still enjoy your life.
And your power.
You'll still enjoy your life and your power if you're white, and if for those of us who are black, we will also enjoy our life. We will. We will. So you should get used to that. You should prepare for that. Because we're human beings. And that's what all human beings are.
So I've got a question from the audience that I'm actually going to give to the panel, and then ask the audience if they want to say something. And oddly enough, Dr. Miles Tribble, is what small thing or first thing do people and people of faith or not of faith can do to make a difference? So they're looking for solutions, they're looking for connections, and did you notice how I just literally gave it away, so I don't want to answer.
I just want to say that it's about 8:20, and I think so we're running short of time as well.
Please, 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 as leaders of your faith communities, encourage the dialogue in your communities. Have some time to have these discussions in a place like a faith community where you're supposed to understand yourself as one family of God. Have a coffee hour, a town hall meeting, a rap session, someplace where this discussion can occur among your congregants. You don't have to have a token black person in the midst. I think that this is a discussion that is even more powerful when people challenge one another in their comfort levels on uncomfortable topics so that some real discourse can come. And then when questions are generated from that discourse, and there are going to be some hurt feelings, people are going to think either you're too conservative or too liberal, but questions will bubble up. Then bring those questions to trusted people and have an expanded dialogue. That's when I think the diversity can come in. But I think it needs to be generated, because I agree with what Yolanda says. Don't invite the token black person in to come and talk, and you haven't had the talk.
Brother Tim?
Sure. Same question. I have been for Lent. This is the capital to me. This just came as an idea. I was thinking in my own head, but during Lent each week I would practice one virtue, which was generosity, gratitude, or humility, or whatever those different things are. And that's the way it works for me, is just small steps, and just as you say, pulling together a big group of people is awesome. But I really liked, I think somebody here mentioned, kind of what starts in your home or what starts in your own heart. And so for me, small steps matter. So, and maybe it's small steps of having a conversation with a colleague or something about race, about something you talked about tonight, sharing what you heard tonight with somebody who wasn't here. And again, everything for me always comes back to relationship and exposure. I have a better sense for my experience having gone to a church of 8,000 where we were the only two members, the white members. That changed my view on things. And so whatever those would be small steps to put yourself in conversation and relationship, more important, relationship about tough things that are happening.
I would say, since most of the people in here are in service-oriented or caring professions, I would say become aware of when your impulse to care or not care is racialized.
Pray with your feet, right? Like, yes, I want you to have conversations. Yes, I want you to be careful. Pray with your feet. There are people who are literally fighting to survive every day. We cannot talk about a kingdom or kingdom of God if my life is disposable, right? So every moment, be intentional about how you are doing the work of valuing someone else being created in the image of God. And let that be more than reflexive. Let that be action. Let it be policy. Let it be holding other people accountable. Let it be checking yourself and how you're living into your privilege. Pray with your feet.
That's very good. You know, one of the things that, and we're getting ready to close, but the thing that got me was you had said something about the top. And Trump had came into office, and I used this, I preached this actually here, and I talked about me being in Arizona, and a woman almost ran me over with her car. And the guy said, hey, you almost ran them over, did you see them? And she said, that's okay, because we have Trump in office.
Wow.
So, what could have been was that he could have corrected her. And he could have said, yeah, but you know it's not right. But the thing is, we're silent about the fact that's what's going on. We don't want to make someone disagree with us, or we don't want them to dislike us, or, you know, so rather than go against the grain, we go along with the grain. And so, when you have conversations with your colleagues, when you go back to your churches, you know what's right. You don't need someone to tell you what's right or wrong. You know what's right or wrong. And it's your responsibility to do what you know. You're accountable for what you know. And so this is what this panel is. This is what this conversation is. This is also, you know, on the back, there's some takeaway points, some resources that you can use. There is, I see, there is a website where we will be adding some other resources and answering some other questions. And this is not a thing that you say, oh, all right, we had this dialogue and now it's over. This is an ongoing process. Because really, I would say white people have a better opportunity of making this change than black people. And the reason I say that is because we can do the civil rights marches and you know, all of that stuff. But really, we can't change the way you think. We can't go back into your communities and tell you what to do, but you can. You can go back and tell her, you know, I just went to this panel discussion, and this is what I've learned. Or if she says, you know, black people, you said, well, why do they have to be black people? Why can't they be people? So, I mean, these are conversations that needs to be held, as you say, Tim, one-on-one. You know, we can have this conversation. We don't need to be in a group or a posse or a pass, you know, a big, huge group of people. But I think if we start working one-on-one, then we can start making a change. Because we're all Americans. We're all people. People of faith, people of color, whether black, white, but it doesn't matter. When I'm a Marine, and when we said in the Marines is everybody's color green. Green machine. And we're all created in God's image. Amen?